Unity must be our plan.
Unity must be.
Welcome to Donkey Talk. We have the privilege tonight to have Chris Schwartz on our show, our county supervisor. Thank you for being here, Chris.
No, thank you so much. It's an honor, and I appreciate your efforts putting the show together.
Well, I appreciate your time. I know how busy you are. With the show, what I usually do is start with your journey from childhood and what kind of brought you to where you are and why you're a Democrat. If you could kind of start there.
Okay. Well, I'd say I was raised in a home that always had progressive values and had a real interest in current affairs and politics from a very young age. I was a newspaper reader from a young age, and we constantly, following what was happening in nationally, but it was the big kind of moment for me came in sixth grade. I was so I would have been 11 years old, attending Holy Ghost Catholic School in Dubuque, and my teacher, Sister Mary Lee Cox, who was a Franciscan nun, who was very involved with a number of social justice issues, including nuclear disarmament issues, and she was also very involved in humanitarian causes in Latin America. Well, that summer, leading up to that fall of my sixth grade year, Dubuque had been terrorized by a series of cross burnings. There were, if memory serves me correctly, about 12 or 13 crosses burned in the front lawns of black families throughout the city. And it was really, really frightening because it was, this stuff that I, remember reading about and hearing about that happened during the civil rights movement of the 50s and 60s. Here was happening in my hometown here in the early 90s in Dubuque, Iowa. And it was terrifying. And one of these happened just a block away from my parents' home, where they still live today. And so it was shocking. But my teacher, Sister Mary Lee, decided we needed to send a message that this kind of stuff wasn't reflective of our city, wasn't going to be tolerated in our neighborhood. And she put together a peace vigil that took place on the front lawn of this home in my neighborhood where this cross burning had happened. And my mother took the four of us down there. I'm the second oldest of four. And we had participated in this peace vigil. And I say from there, that's when the social justice spark was lit in me. And I was just really, really interested, less so in just like the political stuff of candidates and presidents and this and that, but in social movements. And I thought this was really exciting. This is where my heroes are. And my mom got us involved in the NAACP right away. I remember we were licking envelopes and stamping letters
Good
and
for
stuff.
her.
And so I really credit my parents and my sixth grade teacher, Sister Mary Lee Cox, who still lives. She's retired now at the Franciscan Mother Home in Dubuque, and I go and visit her every once in a while
That's
because she was such
nice.
an influence on my life.
Well, you must have been pretty smart to be able to even absorb all of that at such a young age. I look back, I didn't have that influence when I was younger.
Yeah, no, I'll be honest. I was, always, a kid who struggled in school, but was also intelligent at the same time. And actually, it was during that whole kind of period that they, something I kind of share with people because I think it's important that folks struggling with this stuff kind of know. I had a learning disability growing up, dysgraphia, which was a disconnection between kind of my thoughts orally that I could speak on versus my writing skills. There was a disconnect. And so that was a lot of what I was going through at the same time that I was getting involved in social justice stuff.
Yeah.
And I think was really formative on me during those years. And so but I've always been someone that's just constantly reading newspapers. I still read lots of newspapers. I don't watch cable news very often because I think it's just kind of toxic and more entertainment based rather than informative based. But
I completely agree with you there. So what brought you into the Democratic realm?
Yeah, I got involved there in the sixth grade year, and then from there I was, going into high school, I became really involved in music. I started playing the electric bass when I was a freshman in high school, and for the first time, I found something that I was really good at. And that kind of gave me my confidence that I struggled with in those early years, especially because of my learning disability. Now I found something like, wow, I'm good at something, and people recognize that I'm good at this, and it's actually something that's really cool, like playing the electric bass. And so that's what I really had my focus on throughout my high school years. I was peripherally involved in political activities. I came here to the University of Northern Iowa because of the jazz program. And so I came originally as a jazz studies minor and a music education major with electric and upright bass as my instrument.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and so that's what I was going to be doing. I'm plugging away at that. But I also thought when I came to college, my vision in my mind when I was thinking of college, like it was probably more what it looked like on certain campuses in the 60s and 70s, where there were protests and sit-ins and teach-ins and stuff. I'm like, okay, I'm going to be able to go to college, do my music thing, but to get involved in this kind of stuff. And I came to UNI, I'm like, wow, there's not any of that stuff happening. And so I guess that's not what college looks like anymore. And so I just focused on music. And then I volunteered a little bit for Al Gore during the caucuses. This would have been in 1999 and 2000. And he brought Ted Kennedy, and I'd always admired the Kennedy family because I grew up in this a liberal Irish Catholic family. And so my grandmother, who lives outside of Ryan, Iowa, still has the big Ted Kennedy poster hanging in the kitchen.
That's
and
cute.
I'm thankful she's got a Schwartz pin next to it now. But Al Gore had brought Ted Kennedy for a rally at UNI, but then their special guest was Herbie Hancock. And so Herbie Hancock walks out in the gymnasium at the then Price Laboratory School and sits down on this clunky school, gymnasium piano and plays Cantaloupe Island, which is a great jazz standard. I'm like, how cool is this? I'm like, and so that was enough to inspire me to go and volunteer for Al Gore. And so I
combine them.
Yeah, so I'm like, if you're going to get
That's
if Herbie Hancock says I need to do it, I'm going to do it. And so that was my first time that I actually went out and knocked on doors and stuff, because Herbie Hancock asked me to do it. And so I got invested in that campaign through volunteer efforts. And I remember when he got the nomination, it comes down to the election, and I was all fired up, and I said, no matter what happens, I'm not going to go to bed until I know who the next president of the United States is going to be. Well, if we rewind to the 2000 elections, we all know that took a couple weeks to figure out. And ultimately, it was decided by the Supreme Court, which halted the recount in Florida and gave the presidency to George W. Bush. And so I decided at that point, I was listening to a conversation in the lead up to that Supreme Court decision on Iowa Public Radio, and they were discussing that though it's troubling that we don't know the outcome of this election yet, all these weeks in, it shows how strong our democracy is, that people aren't, out in the streets demonstrating and such. And
rebelling.
I thought the opposite. I thought it showed how dangerously complacent the American public had become. And I decided then and there different types of people needed to go into politics. And so I did a U-turn on University Avenue in a place that was legal to do it, and went back and added a political science major. And from
Good
there,
for you.
And then I started a chapter of the American Civil Liberties Union on campus, and that was the first activist group that I got involved with, was doing civil liberties work. And then as the drums of war started beating towards Afghanistan and ultimately Iraq, that's what I became most passionate about, and became very involved in the student anti-war movement, and ended up in the national leadership of this network we called the Campus Anti-War Network, where we had 50 chapters at different campuses all across the country, and I became their national spokesperson. So all of a sudden, I'm this kid that was just starting to get involved in politics,
a leader,
and now I'm leading this whole thing, and now I'm on MSNBC talking about it and all this stuff, and I'm like, and it was all just started because I looked around and I said, if not me, who else is going to do it? And so
that's right.
I didn't have any plans. I was not a good public speaker when I started all this stuff. I was always very nervous and very shy, and actually still, it surprises people, I'm still a little bit of a shy person.
Well, you're
but
ultra
I'm also
sensitive, yeah.
But I'm very outgoing and stuff at the same time because I had to, and I had to develop those skills to do this stuff.
When you're passionate about what you're doing, you care.
Right, absolutely.
It comes from the heart. That's what makes a difference. And that's what I find about the Democratic Party. Most of the people that are involved, it comes from the heart.
Yeah, it was, and today many of the things that motivated me then are still what motivates me now. I just look at the struggles people in my own family have, whether it's through access to mental health or health care, or whether it's friends of mine that have struggled with addiction through their lives, or the communities I've seen, including my own community growing up, this community here in Waterloo, and all the number of small communities that have been devastated through bad trade agreements like NAFTA and the permanent normalized trade relations with China, all that stuff that happened in the early 90s that really took a lot of good jobs away from these communities, and at the same time we're exploiting workers in developing nations. And so, I'm still mostly today motivated by the struggles I see in the people, the people around me. Coming out of college, I thought I'd probably end up in Washington, D.C. or something, because that's where you go, but I was offered a position with the group Americans for Democratic Action, which happens to be our nation's oldest progressive advocacy organization, founded by Eleanor Roosevelt and Hubert Humphrey in 1947. And so I was hired to be their Iowa organizer and have worked for them ever since. I thought it'd be a 6-month kind of thing, and they liked my work and they've kept me, and so that's allowed me to be able to live here in this community that I love so much.
So now you've been a city for a whole term, or pretty close to a term.
I was elected to the County Board of Supervisors in 2016, and so I'm up for re-election this year, and so I am just over 3 years into my first term, and I've really enjoyed it quite a bit.
And your accomplishments are amazing. I want you to talk about them, please.
Yeah, so I was just kind of looking back through everything we've been able to get done. We have a major solar project that is just about ready to go out to bid. That's going to take 7 of our county buildings to be completely solar. This is an investment that over the life of these solar panels will save about $3 million in taxpayer money that would otherwise be spent on utilities. Well, at the same time,
great.
Yeah, and at the same time has the environmental impact of planting 500,000 trees. And so the building I'm most proud of is our Pinecrest building, which is on Independence Avenue. Used to be the St. Francis Hospital. That building is going to be 99% solar when we're done with this project. And so it's
awesome.
Amazing to be able to take a beautiful historic structure like that and realize that these places still have green potential. Because as people that really follow this stuff know, the most green construction is rehabilitation of already existing buildings. And so it's really great to be able to continue to give that wonderful building a new life into this century. Then we'll be taking a number of our smaller buildings completely solar as well.
Did you start that?
Yeah, that was, so I serve as the chair of the Blackhawk County's Alternative Energy Committee that looks at all these projects, and so this was kind of my pet project to push forward.
Awesome.
Some other things I'm very proud of is we are just a few weeks away from the ribbon cutting at our new VA center. This has been a vision of our past VA director and our current VA director. And I saw this and I said, we need to make sure that this is funded. And so I fought in last year's budget to make sure that this project was completely funded. And so it's going to remodel a portion of the Pinecrest building.
Where's that at?
That's the building that we're taking completely solar on Independence Avenue, the old St. Francis Hospital.
Oh, that's where he was. Kevin Deal used to be there.
Yeah, and so there was a daycare center in there that recently moved out that had been renting space from us.
Yeah.
And so we saw that move as an opportunity to reuse that space for this Veterans Center.
That's perfect.
And so there's going to be just a place that the veterans can drop in a safe environment where people understand them. There will be a space for kind of safe and private counseling services if they need to talk to somebody, as well as just providing activities and a place to congregate.
Place to hang out.
Yeah, a place to hang out, and what will be different from this and the other places that exist in our community. So there's a number of great veteran service organizations. You've got the VFW, and you've got all the AMVETS and all that stuff. All great places, and all serve a role in our community. But some folks, for the different things they're going through in their life, aren't comfortable being in a situation where there's a bar, where there's alcohol being served. And so this provides a veterans space
Safe house.
that is, you know, conducive for people that are dealing with addiction at the same time as well. It's for everybody, but it's
Right.
also it's a, you know, just a place that's going to be able to not only continue doing all the services that are already provided at the Veterans Affairs office, but also have a center that is theirs and their space to use and do community programming and all sorts of stuff.
That is awesome. They need that.
Yeah.
And they can socialize, and they can make friends.
Absolutely.
And tell their stories, and sometimes that's healing
Right.
in itself, to
Absolutely.
be able to share it.
And you know, a couple other things I'm really proud of would be just our investment in our conservation efforts through the county conservation department and the parks. When I came on the board, we were looking at plans were to permanently close the Wolf Creek Bridge, which is part of the Cedar River Nature Trail. This bridge is located in LaPorte City, where the trail goes through, and they just thought it was going to be, all the estimates that they were getting was going to be too costly. And I said, no, let's get here, let's fund a study and find out how much it's actually going to cost. So we were able to fund the study, and our conservation department did what they do best, took that investment of taxpayer dollars, which is about $80,000, to look at the engineering study, and they were able to turn that into motivating the community, the bicycling community, to help fundraise money, and then match that with a number of state and federal grants. And so that bridge is going to
That's awesome.
stay open. We're working on our next bridge on the trail system. We've been able to expand the acres of land that's in conservation, which helps out with our water quality efforts, as well as flood mitigation. I do a lot of work on watershed management. So there are entities in Iowa, it's called a Watershed Management Authority.
Yeah.
And I serve on the Middle Cedar River and Upper Cedar River. And we've been working through, under a large HUD grant that was targeting flood resiliency for impoverished areas. And so this Middle Cedar River watershed goes across Blackhawk County. There's portions in Grundy County. It's in Tama and Benton, and then Lynn County. And so we've been able to do a handful of infrastructure programs in there, doing things like what you call a saturated buffer, or retention ponds, and bioreactors. And what these are all different ways of capturing water that's running off of fields
Too much.
before it ends up into our streams. And so these efforts, the great thing is that when most of the things that you work on for flood resiliency, if you're doing in this manner, also have the other effect of improving water quality. Because we know that most of the bodies of water in Iowa are impaired to some degree or not.
I know. What can we do about that? As far as, my brother's an organic farmer,
Right.
and he used to work for BioAg. And he proved that he could have a larger crop by going organic than to use chemicals.
Right. No, you do no-till farming, and you do use cover crops. And what we're finding in this watershed management and watershed coalition work is that a lot of the family farmers are there at the table with us. They just
That's
need,
good.
but the farm economy is what it is, and it's kind of out of their hands sometimes. What they're pressured to grow, and the ways they're growing it, the yields that they're expected to get. And so, we need to be making more and more resources available for them to implement these best practices.
Right.
Because I see a big willingness on those parts. We've also been working with land management companies. So a lot of times somebody owns a chunk of farmland, and they send it to a land management company, like Hertz is one of the big ones, so this company manages their land for them. And we've been able to get some of those companies on board for some of these conservation efforts as well. And that's where you really spread this to a lot of places. And so it's critically important. But if folks want to see this work really continue, they should be, one thing they can do is pressure their state lawmakers to fund the I Will program. In 20, I believe it was 2010, the voters of the state approved by a 60% majority the funding of a 3/8 cents sales tax that would go to benefit conservation programs and
That's
recreation. The problem is that though the voters approved that on the ballot, it has not been implemented by our state lawmakers or our governor. And so there's talk of that finally happening this year, but we want to make sure it happens in a way that isn't just robbing Peter to play Paul and playing a nutshell
Exactly.
game where they say, okay, we're going to fund this, but now we're going to take away all the other DNR funding. And so we got to be really careful about how this gets done.
So what do we
gets
need to
implemented.
do to help that?
Yeah, so call up your state representatives, your state senators, and the governor's office, and say, let's fund I Will to the fullest
Oh,
extent,
write that down.
and make sure we're doing it in a way that's not just displacing the current funding mechanism for the
Can you
DNR.
post that on Facebook? Because
Yeah,
I
yeah,
have
absolutely.
thousands of people
Yeah,
on my
there's
LinkedIn. I want to
there's some
share
really
that.
great advocacy groups that have some fantastic resources. I'll definitely connect you with those.
Oh, tell them your Facebook page so that they
Oh
can.
yeah, if you wanted to connect with me on Facebook, on Facebook my page is Chris Schwartz, Blackhawk County Supervisor, and I try to share information about what's happening in the community as well as updates on what's happening in the county as well.
So is that the best way for people to contact you?
No, I mean, so that's one of the ways people
Okay.
can call my office line. They can also call my cell phone. If you call my office line and I don't answer, my voicemail is going to tell you what my cell phone number is too, so that I try to be as accessible to folks as possible. Email is also really great, and you can
Go ahead and tell them what your phone line
Yeah,
is and stuff.
yeah. You can call my office line is 319-833-3074.
Right there. There's your camera.
And it's
Right in the middle.
319-833-3074. That's how you reach my office line.
Okay. Well, and that way you can get the information. But real quick before we're kind of on the line here, I think we could do another show with you. I want to talk about your future plans and what you're doing with, what's it called?
The warming center.
The
yeah.
Warming Center.
Yeah, so after last year's polar vortex, where folks died last winter on the streets in Waterloo.
Oh, that's terrible.
And people were coming into the hospitality house, which is on Mulberry Street, and with frostbite in those days because they're out all night in those dangerously cold temperatures. And we said, we can't let this happen again in the community. And so we had pulled a coalition of organizations that work with the homeless population, as well as just community advocates, to establish a warming center. Just in the nick of time before our planned opening in January, we got the participation from Jubilee United Methodist Church, which is on East 4th and Newell Street, offered up their Freedom Resource Center. And we were very ecstatic because we had been going to place after place after place, and everybody was just worried about the liability or just not even responding at all.
That's what they're about.
But then we found out that we needed to move into a different facility that would be a little or better equipped with sprinkler system. So ultimately, we were fortunate that Hawkeye Community College stepped forward and offered the use of the former Hawkeye Metro Center.
The Metro Center on 4th Street.
Yep, on 4th Street.
So people need to know that 4th Street's open for people.
Yeah, so we will remain open through March is our planned hours of operation. And we open each evening at 8 o'clock, and then we close at 7 a.m. And we will be there with now.
Oh, that's lovely.
And now the struggle is to find our permanent location for next year.
So do you have food there too?
So we keep snacks on hand, and then we also send people out with kind of a prepared kind of breakfast bag of things like
nice.
granola and things that are easy to
And
transport.
healthy. That's nice.
And then make sure that folks know when they do check in, we set them up with whatever. We give them the option to be connected with services in the community that can help them on a path out of homelessness.
You have such a big heart. Oh my God, we are so lucky to have you as a
Thank you.
supervisor. Well, we're coming to the end of the show. Thank you, Chris,
No, thank
for
you.
being on the show, and thank you for watching the show. Have a good night. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
questioning our wants.
Spreading out